The new Alcatel FM radio phone from GT&T.
GT&T mobile money, easy as 1, 2, 3. Get access to your money like ABC. Buy your own credit, pay your own bills. Send and receive money anytime, anyway. Money in your phone, mobile money.
Get registered today for your mobile account. Dial *123#. Register for free at any mobile money agent or GT&T office with your GT&T mobile phone. GT&T, best value in Guyana.
Program which looks at issues of interest to you. Welcome to tonight's program with Dr. Grantley Warren.
We are well into the second year of the 2011 elections, which threw up, among other things, a minority-led government and a parliament with which it seems to have been in odds. Both of them creatures of the decision-making on the part of the electorate. We have opposition-led bills not being signed by the president, who's part of the parliament. Then we have government bills, government motions and bills, for whatever sets of reasons, also not being supported by the opposition group, whether in retaliation for the government's actions of non-recognition of the absolute majority which is held by the combined opposition, or simply that the government has not been disposed to engaging the opposition as it should in the governance of the country. In the interim, many of the required changes in governance, economic performance and transparency, which found their way into party manifestos as they approached the 2011 elections, and stated objects of party concerns have gone unnoticed, unfulfilled, and the citizenry becoming more and more bewildered by what in fact is happening in this country. What are the next steps which must be engaged to change this situation? This will be a series that we will be doing, because we feel that except we as citizens become engaged and move to activism in this particular area of attempting to cause some sense of functionality of our institutions, we're not going anywhere. To assist us with this first in the discourse of next steps are three very politically aware gentlemen. They are and have expressed that awareness in various forms of activism from time to time. With us this evening we have Mr. Aubrey Norton, Mr. Mark Archer, and Mr. Eugene Gilbert. Gentlemen, welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, in my introductory comment I talked about the concern about governance, and that I think it's almost a catch-all, but which really captures the imagination of people, even as people organize themselves and set up an electoral machinery and set itself to be governed by an executive and a parliament, and which will all then set up a judiciary which will intervene in process in terms of interpretation laws, etc. We clearly have not been moving to the greater state of governance. If anything, real impasse. What I intend to do now is to treat with some of those things that I say in the interim, while this impasse seems to have taken hold, some of the things that we all deem to have been essential and necessary as we went into the 2011 elections, just to raise them, to see if you could reflect on and say what next steps are in the best interest of this country. Let me, for the want of no particular order, but because it is so absolutely essential, I think since 1994, we had our last local government elections in this country. And, well, 20 years is running, and we do not know yet whether we will. Your comment on the state of local democracy and the local government elections. Desirability or not?
Well, maybe going to let me kick off the batting, so to speak. One would have thought that after 47 years of independence, we would have reached a stage of greater maturity as a body politic and a more socially responsible government, or more socially responsible governance of the country. It just happens that local government has been a very critical part of our system of governance over the years. You'll recall prior to the present regional system, there was a very active system of village councils, so to speak. I recall as a youngster, the village councils were very active, very involved, and people oriented. You have seen over the years the village councils have basically disappeared. You'll recall also such champions as Herbert McGowan, who was president of what was then GALA, Guyana Association of Local Authority, coming from the quarantine.
He was my headmaster.
Well, he was your headmaster. I recall that in those days, local government meant something to the people down there. I can't say the same now. I really cannot say the same now. It means that we have lost the meaning of the importance of local government in this country. With the beckoning of the new system, so to speak, and after 20 years, no local government elections, what I found happening in a lot of the neighborhood councils and even the regional democratic councils, a lot of the councillors have either died, have either migrated, and there's a serious void of leadership in the regional councils, and there's an ad hoc policy of replacing these councillors wherever they are, whether it's the neighborhood council or the regional democratic council, by either the regional minister or some minister of government. No democratic form of bringing out from these local areas people who can give the leadership and who are willing to serve our country. So we are left bereft of leadership at the local level, and that is one of the maladies of the situation as it stands right now. I haven't delved deeply into the latest Commission's report on local government, but certainly the situation as it stands right now is getting worse.
Mm.
So that is my preliminary comments on the state of play with local government.
I tell you what, Mark and Aubrey, even as you pick this up, I wonder if perhaps you may help us by putting in context what local government means within the context of appropriate governance in a country. And even as you do that, then perhaps we will secondly treat with where we currently stand and the thing that seems to be between ourselves and the next move at local government elections?
Well, if I can, I would like to touch on it from a geographical standpoint, and then Aubrey maybe can expand on that. We are a very large country. We're a very big country. We're 83,000 square miles, very diverse in terms of population, in terms of geography, and it is very difficult to try to govern a country like Guyana with a top-down type of government. It would mean that there are many constituencies that will not be representative, and that's because of our geography. It's very difficult getting from Georgetown to Lethem. It's not easy. You can either get there by road, which takes a very, very long time, or you get there by airplane. People there don't get newspapers, they don't see Guyanese television, they don't get Guyanese radio, they don't get newspapers. So you have a communications kind of blackout. Therefore, in a community like that, in order to have good governance, they have to self-govern. The people in the community have to get together, elect their leaders, and govern those little communities. And that is why 30 years ago, when we set up the regional democratic systems and we developed the 10 regions of Guyana, that was meant to solve that particular problem, so that these regions would self-govern, and you'd have this whole local government thing channeling up and feeding in to parliamentary democracy. But the goal was to start at the neighborhood with the neighborhood democratic councils, and then you had the regional democratic councils, and then they would get up now to the national level. When you look at little villages, and Eugene touched on it earlier, back in the 60s and the early 70s, they pretty much self-governed. You had the village chairman, and you had a tier of leadership that answered to the villagers. And if they didn't perform, they were voted out because they were answerable to the people. What we have here today is a system where the people are not represented, and you have systems that are foisted on them by a central authority. That is not democracy.
Aubrey?
Well, I think first of all one has to recognize that the People's Progressive Party does not have an interest in democracy. There was a time when demographically they thought they had an inbuilt majority, and therefore it suited them to spout democracy. But as we can see from what has happened in the last election, when I was in Parliament during the last time, and they used to be making noise when you talk, saying, the people have given us a mandate, we have 51%. They do say that no longer. But what is worse, they're not prepared to acknowledge now that the people have given another set of people the 51%. So you're talking about a group that has no interest in democracy. They have an interest in domination and power. When they came to government in 1992, they had talked so much about local government election while the PNC was in government that they were compelled to hold a local government election. And so it was held in 1994. But the constitutional reform process decided that changes will be made to the local government system. And that is what the PPP is afraid of. Let me tell you what they're afraid of. One, at present, the minister is God. He determines everything in local government. And therefore, the new dispensation, the reform, one element of the reform is the Local Government Commission. Now that commission will be an independent commission that deal with these issues void of the political control of the minister. The PPP doesn't like that. First problem. The second problem they have, the intention with the reform is for there to be depoliticization of the political system. There will be more independent people running in the election. In the case of the towns, half will be political party, half people can run independently. The PPP doesn't want that. They want to be in control of everybody in the local government system. And so they don't want a change in which independents can run and people can be elected because the people in the community believe this person has the power. So they're up against that. Then there is what is called the allocation, objective criteria for the allocation of resources. As it stands, Ashley Singh and company sit like God, and they allocate money to whoever they like, whenever they like, however they like, and how much they like. Now, in a new local government system, that will go. You will sit down and work out objective criteria, population, and a number of things, and therefore you will have a clearer, more consistent approach to allocation of resources, and it can help to end the discrimination that the government practices. So they don't want an objective criteria for allocation of resources. Then the Constitution says that regions should develop national plans and they should be integrated into regional plans and they should be integrated into the national plan. Well, they don't have a national plan. And they don't want regions to develop plans and then integrate it. I make these points to show that the intention of the local government reform is to shift power to the people. And the People's Progressive Party, as one member of parliament used to describe them, are control freaks. They are political dominators. And they don't want the people involved in political power. So the mere idea of for them to be local government, for there to be local government election, these reforms have got to be passed and a new system will come in place. What in essence that system will do is reduce the power of political parties and increase the power of the people. The People's Progressive Party wouldn't want that. It will go against the corruption, because now they could say they put money in a region and there's no mechanism for accountability. They can handpick people, and the next step really should be for the opposition to get together and say no to IMCs and mobilize the people, inform them what the new system is, because there's an education deficit. And unless you deal with the education deficit and get the people to understand what this new system is, you're in trouble. But what the opposition needs to do is to get out there, go into the villages, go into the communities, explain to the people what the system is, and agitate the people to, look, you're not going to achieve anything with this government if you believe parliamentary democracy alone. It has to be a combination of your activity in parliament and serious activism that puts the PPP under pressure. The PPP doesn't respond to reason. They respond to real political force that threatens their power.
Now, as it stands at the moment, therefore, we notice that apart from the calls generally, I notice even civic society is now calling for local government elections, indicating that they must be held, that we also have some of our visitors, the representatives of some foreign missions, also insisting, and who have had an abiding interest in supporting the growth of democracy in this country, and have spent a significant amount of money to assist the development of quote-unquote democracy. They are also saying that there really should be no excuses around this time, that local government elections can be held this year. That I thought was a very significant development. What are your quick views?
Well, as Aubrey pointed out earlier, indeed, this interest from external actors in implementing our local government system is very critical. It's a very critical component in the trust for bringing accountable governance to the Republic. And as Aubrey pointed out, a lot of the resources that the ABC countries want to put into Guyana, they wanted to reach to the people down there at the level of the community. So they are very interested in the extent to which power is devolved. There must be a serious devolution of power to the local communities, and I think the foreign actors want to see that. They want to see a great.
So it's almost like protecting the outcome of that they have set themselves. The beneficiaries must, in fact, receive it, and those are the people in the local
precisely.
community.
And I've noticed in a lot of programs now, donor support programs. Those programs are aimed directly at the beneficiaries down at the community level. and trying to avoid a government interference in the way these resources are dispersed. And I think that is very fundamental to the whole system of local government. Be aware also, anyhow, as Aubrey pointed out, be aware that the system is likely to be manipulated by the powers that be. In certain communities, a man may appear to be independent, but then it's just it's just a creature of the powers that be, appearing to be an independent. These things that you have to recognize them. Only the people at the level of the community will be able to recognize.
Yeah, and in fact, the law creates an enabling environment. So whether the manipulations occur, at least the enabling features are there.
I think too, the ABC countries and international organizations are seeking to evaluate on the ground what is happening. I know in a recent case of Plaisance, the IDB went to Plaisance. And when you compare the document that the government purports to operate by, and you talk with the people who should have gotten paid on the ground and what should have happened, there's a variance so large, the Essequibo will look small. And so the people have recognized that to deal with the corruption of this government, they have to get at the local communities, and even, I don't think they want to pass it through the government. Now, if you follow what had happened, say, after 1989-90, the international community changed its approach and started to move directly to local communities to ensure that the people are the actual beneficiaries. Because a lot of the research would have shown that where governments are given the resources to get it down to the local community, more so governments like the one we have, the kleptomaniac nature has resulted in a situation where the people don't actually benefit. And I believe in an attempt to destroy this kleptocracy we have, they are trying to get the resources to the people as a means of not continuing to give this government access to money that doesn't go to its target audience.
Yes, I noticed in Aubrey's original contribution, he talked about the question of the Local Government Commission, which is now going to be subject of a specific act to bring it about, and that is part of one of the three pieces of legislation that had to be put in place. The other one talked about fiscal transfers, the basis on which there was going to be an objective set of criteria to establish to transfer funds to various areas so that they could, as Mark identified, they could self-govern with minimal interference and with greater sense of local intelligence about delivery and, of course, returns. Now, I tell you what, there is one other area which is tied to our electoral arrangements, which has seemingly gone unnoticed for a long time. It raises its head come every election, but it seems to have passed out of our consciousness. And that was the whole question of the Elections Commission. If I remember correctly, the Elections Commission that we currently have was supposed to have been a one-off arrangement that was put in place
Jimmy Carter.
well nigh 20 years ago, and that it should have been superseded by another arrangement which would have more reflected the mores of our country. The shortcomings of this current one having been noted, in particular such things as the life of the principal occupants, the commissioners, etc. And but shouldn't that also have been a basic thing that we must once again engage if we are going to have the kind of society, the cohesive society, where sense of transparency and openness and all of that is in place? Your quick comments.
Grantley, I think that with respect to the commission, I remember distinctly after the 2011 elections, there was a big hue and cry that something was amiss, that this commission had to be changed, that the commission was too politicized, that there was that a particular officer of that commission, Mr. Boudou, had already had his 3 strikes and should be out. Speaking about the 3 elections in which he managed to just make severe blunders in each of them, one of which actually caused a political party a seat, and he was supposed to go. And after things kind of we start to get on with the whole matter of governance, I think this went to the back burner, along with things like constitutional reform. And I feel that this is where the political opposition has to be constantly, as Aubrey said, agitating and keeping these things in the public's eye. Because I feel strongly that if we go to local government elections with some of the same things we have in place and some of the same commissioners, and if Mr. Boudou is allowed to return to probably make a 4th blunder, and who knows what that blunder would be, then I think that we stand the chance of having severe public unrest in this country, and that is a fact. I don't think people will take it this time like they did the last time. Sorry?
I want to disagree with Mark. I won't call what Boudou did a blunder. It is a conscious collusion with the government to ensure that they stay in power. And if the opposition is worth its salt, there should be no discussion as to whether Gokul Boudou goes. It should be with automaticity. Gokul Boudou has established that he is not neutral, that he's partisan. I don't know what kind of blunder will allow you to air 3 consecutive elections on one side.
In favor of
If
one
you
side.
are making a blunder like that, then something is wrong. So for me, it's not a blunder. It is clear collusion, and the opposition should not be discussing whether Boudou continues or not. He served his time. It's time for him to go. There is need for somebody who is a little more objective and doesn't see through the eyes only of the PPP. That's my first position. I think we need to go back to deal with the question of the Elections Commission. The Elections Commission, there was a debate as to whether it should be a permanent commission or not. Some people felt it should not have been permanent. I was one of those who felt it should not be permanent. And I've expressed that on many programs before. But having made it permanent, as I understood it, the decision was that it will be looked at and an attempt will be made to change to find a more appropriate commission. But I always live in a real world. Were you the PPP, would you want this that exists change? The answer is no. They're comfortable with it. And therefore, it is the opposition's task to drive the machine of change, to ensure it changes. But there's another dimension we are forgetting. We are forgetting that the system itself used was temporary. It was a temporary system. And that we should have gone back to the drawing board and develop a more appropriate election system that permits direct accountability. You ask some people who are the MP, even in the region, they don't know. Because they are not obligated to go and serve them and account to them. They are identified by the leadership of the party. It's like the classic, Sama is never in Linden, but he was Linden rep. So you need a system in which people are accountable, elected people are accountable to the people, and the people must know that they can be hired or fired. The present system breeds incompetence. You can be as incompetent as what? But
Loyalty is what counts.
live loyal to somebody, and you can continue the level of idiocy in parliament for years. We need a system in which you're from Plaisance, the people there must have a say in whether you be MP or not. Or Germany, wherever you're from. because you need a situation that will encourage competence. The present situation encourages mediocrity. And I think that needs to change at every level. In certain countries, if you can't win your own constituency, you can't be in the parliament. But we have a situation where when you identify a parliamentarian, probably the first time people hear his name. Now, going to the other extreme is bad, because you also need some professional people who might not necessarily be a good politician. So you can have a dual system, like is being tried with the local government. And let us develop a system that brings accountability and ensure that people who call themselves representatives, be they at the regional level, or it's like Plaisance, the minister appoints people, and since the appointment of this IMC, I could say without fear of successful contradiction that the garbage collection situation has deteriorated. I don't want to see the reason for it at present. I'm studying it and I'm accumulating the evidence. But you can't have these officials just appointed by the government.
The point I want to bring in here, when Jimmy Carter came here and brokered the agreement for the structuring of the commission as it stands right now, he indicated that it was temporary. When he came back, I recall vividly that he was very disgusted that they hadn't transformed the commission and other things, other agreements that they made in fulfillment of this new dispensation of independence of the Elections Commission.
That's correct.
And as Aubrey said, the pressure needs to be mounted to bring the commission to a point where it is recognized truly as an independent commission, even if you may have a spot representative of the political parties. It must be seen overwhelmingly as an independent, fearless commission, exercising its duty without ill will or fear.
Yes. It's two things, and a number of these commissions, rights and other commissions that were instituted as a consequence of the Herdmanston, the post-97 difficulties that we had, and the Herdmanston agreements. These governance style institutions that were supposed to have been put in place, all of the rights commissions, including also, that is as we amended our constitution, including also the procurement and elections commission, they were intended to reduce the presence of government which was seen to be too autocratic, too much out of control, and consequently facilitating the greater participation of all groups, political and civil, in the decision making of our country. Yeah.
A classic case is after the constitutional reform process, there was put in place what is called the Parliamentary Management Committee, which I sat on. It was agreed that the government will prepare a legislative agenda and submit it to the Parliamentary Management Committee. So you had a clear idea over a period of what bills are coming. The government consistently refused. Sam said at one time, we're bringing it shortly. And every time we bringing it shortly. They never brought it. And that is why when I saw the money laundering bill, I thought it should not be passed. Because here is a situation where the rules provide for you to bring it so that the parties could sit down and agree on a legislative agenda and move forward. Now that money laundering bill was in the parliament since the previous parliament. All of us know why the government doesn't want a money laundering bill. It will stop them from getting some of the money they get even to run the political party. And so you need to go to a situation where there's a clear legislative agenda. It comes before the parliament early, so parliamentarians can prepare in advance and go to the National Assembly and address the bills because they had time. But you see what has happened to the government is this. they were accustomed to a majority. And what would have happened in the last parliament, they would have come with that same bill. And they would have behaved, put their head in the air, talk, and don't care about you. And that is why I disagree when Mr. Granger says it's not having its impact. The budget cuts might not be having financial impact. It's having its impact. It is sending them mad. They're accustomed to doing as they like, and they can't.
I tell you what we'll do is that we'll take a short break, we'll recognize the responses, and then we will return where we should have a look at. We focused on areas that the government's feet need to be kept in the fire as far as governance matters are concerned. We'll talk about the political opposition when we next return.
The new Alcatel FM radio phone from GT&T.
GT&T mobile money, easy as 1, 2, 3. Get access to your money like ABC. Buy your own credit, pay your own bills. Send and receive money anytime, anyway. Money in your phone, mobile money.
Get registered today for your mobile account. Dial star 123 pound. Register for free at any mobile money agent or GT&T office with your GT&T mobile phone. GT&T, best value in Guyana.
When we started looking in a serious way about how we might reform our 1980 Constitution, one thing became quite evident is that everyone, well, for different sets of reasons, admitted that there was a serious schism in the country at large, that this needed to be bridged, and that we needed to have a greater sense of inclusive governance to help foster the sense of an inclusionary democracy. Some called it all kinds of inclusive democracy, but with trust building measures. Some called it shared governance, etc. Now, in particular, after this whole story, this impasse that is currently beset us, and I think even before, but during the impasse for sure, we seem to have lost sight of this being a central concern of our country. That perhaps one of the major problems we have, if we do not solve, is putting all of the country to work at the same time with the same expectations about the sharing of the benefits. Let me start with one. The PNC's manifesto for the last 2 or 3 election cycles explicitly recognizes this notion of shared governance as being central to its view to how we need to organize ourselves to create a better sense of governance in this country. But I'm not hearing the PNC talking anything about this. Your comments?
Well, you have to understand shared governance in context. First of all, when the PNC suggested shared governance, the government's response was, it can't come unless there is trust. And they wanted some measures to build trust. It was evident at the time that they had no intention of sharing power, have no interest in shared governance. And then a lot of the people who are in shared governance, who are supportive of shared governance in the PNC, moved out to the leadership of the PNC. So I do agree that there is a lull. But the concept of shared governance is still relevant. You need a situation in Guyana where all and sundry feel they are part and parcel of the decision-making apparatus. And that is the critical issue. And we need some system of governance that will do that. But I do not believe it is going to be had at the bargaining table easily. shared governance is cutting at the power of political parties, whether we like it or not. The government intends, as you could see from being a minority government, they intend to wield power as if they're the majority. So that tells you how distant shared governance is from them. Even when you would have lost the majority, you're not prepared to accommodate the opposition. That tells you they never had an interest, they will never have an interest. Where do we go with shared governance? You have to have a situation again. I do believe that political parties do not give you things just like that because you go to a press conference and talk of it because you smile. Political parties respond to real power. For you to get shared governance, you have to have a situation where you educate the people, mobilize them, and act decisively to get some form of shared governance. This government don't even intend to share ideas, much less government. No, because you see, in proper societies, at least you start, look, let us discuss the idea, and then agree, and then we could move from there. They are not even prepared to discuss ideas. They start from the position that they have the only idea, the right idea, even if it is wrong. And so we're in a dilemma in the society. The society has not yet developed a political culture that sees consensus as important to success. And unless we solve that problem, we have nowhere to go. If you listen to the government, they have no intention of finding a consensus. They want to steamroll their way through and govern like they used to govern. It is the opposition's task to keep their feet to the fire and ensure that they come to the table and be prepared to start first bargain at the level of ideas, then at the level of decision making.
Rantley, I think that Aubrey hit on it at the end when he actually spoke about the government thinking they had a monopoly on ideas. We must first, though, understand that inclusive democracy is an important tenet of the current constitution we're working with, even though I have severe reservations about this constitution. So I'll just put that out there. It is something that is in the Constitution, inclusive democracy. However, I feel strongly that we do not have the political culture and the political maturity for anything resembling shared governance in Guyana. Our political culture, we come from a political culture where political parties dominate. I mean, history is very important. We must look to history to see why we are where we are. And coming out of that history, we are where we are, where we have these two juggernauts, two political juggernauts, who were intent for many, many years to rule. And when I say rule, rule completely. And it will take some time for pragmatic forces, politically pragmatic forces, who can do what Aubrey said, who can realize that you can have all the ideas.
Eugene, I'm certain you're going to, you want to make your intervention on this. But as you do so, I wish for you to take on board, in part, what Aubrey said and extend on it from the standpoint that no one is going to give you anything. No one will, with any magnanimity, say, I will share with you my power. And that you consequently have to organize yourself, force your mind, and then put in place a plan to achieve the objective. Notwithstanding what Mark says, that we are not mentally predisposed to have inclusive governance. I wonder, therefore, as someone who says to oneself, if the PNC says that it is promoting shared governance, then it has an obligation to have that issue be centrally raised at whatever levels there are opportunities for the conducting of its business. Your comment.
Well, let me reflect on what Mark said just now. We haven't reached the level of maturity, political maturity, to be socially responsible enough to gouge ourselves to be magnanimous in promoting inclusive governance. And as Aubrey pointed out, is a question of the dominance of power.
Yeah, but all of that haven't been said, Eugene.
Yeah.
All of that haven't been said. The central point is that you wish to promote an idea, but you have not even yet put before me your concept of what.
Well, that is part of the problem.
You really want.
Yeah, that is part of the problem.
In a way that engages the whole public again.
I am not convinced, like so many others, that the political opposition has really militantly and stridently brought its case to the people. I don't know for what reason, but I get a sense that the opposition has become very lackluster in promoting its vision for inclusive governance, and that is it seems to be a problem that is pervasive, because everywhere you go, the people, I mean, they talk about these problems, but then they reflect on the fact that they're not given the level of leadership that is required to really bring them out in force, to make its case forcefully for change. And I think that is part of the problem. And I fear that it is becoming a little chronic, because here and now the government of course evaluates your performance, evaluates your strength, and decide, I mean, whether they will listen to you or not, or whether they will respond to you or not. And I think that's something that we need to really examine. I mean, to what extent is the political opposition really presenting and carrying its case to see, I mean, to cause change. And the other thing is that I would like to make this point. A lot of our problems reside in the structure of the Constitution and our system of government. I have advocated before that serious constitutional change has to take place. Whether that can happen is another issue. We cannot continue to have an executive president, a man who's wielding absolute executive power based purely on a plurality, in which case it's a minority. It can't continue. I have advocated that anyone who wielding that level of power must come to me with at least 60% of the electorate. And if you can't get that in the elections, let there be a runoff between the major contenders. Or I've also advocated that we maybe have a system of governance like Trinidad, with a bicameral assembly and a president who's in control of the military and the commissions and so on, so that we have recourse.
No, hold on one second. I'm not even there yet. Sure.
Unless we accept that there is a political intellectual bankruptcy at present, and that I mean both governing party and opposition. And let me tell you why I say there's an intellectual political bankruptcy. Whether you like Jagan, Burnham and them or not, Hoyt, in that era, you had a situation where on every major issue there was a policy position. You no longer get policy position. You get firefighting. The AFC said there's need for constitutional reform. What constitutional reform? No document to tell you until now. A political party.
That is exactly the point.
Any political party, let me make this point. Any political party that hopes to carry Guyana forward has to have a strong intellectual core. And that intellectual core has to formulate policies that they can put out there and the people buy into. What you have is firefighting. The opposition says something, the government firefight. The government says something, the opposition firefights. Take for instance the issue of race. You cannot turn to any political party like you could have done probably in the 60s and 70s and probably the 80s and say, give me a document on race so that you would have read it and know what is the policy position on race. There's no policy position. There's talk about Amaila Falls, this, etc. But the PPP, the AFC, the PNC, APN, you name them, there is absolutely no policy document on energy. And that is why I say there's an intellectual bankruptcy. The political parties need to go back to the drawing board. The leadership has to find people of a professional quality that can develop these policy positions, and then the party operates based on policies. Years ago, political parties had an elite that was intellectually respected. I must submit that is gradually going. And that is the political bankruptcy that I'm talking about. And unless that is rectified, we are in serious problems. To take what is happening in Parliament, except for the area in finance where you're seeing some clear ideas as to what should happen with the system. There's none in agriculture. There's none in education.
I think the Aubrey has captured the essence of what these next steps intend to do. It is to identify, look, one can talk from now until the cows come home and they never do. Except you are clear about the list of things that you need to do and the priority that each of them should have, and therefore engage others, including your immediate opposition, whether you're a government or the other, with those ideas. It's not until then do you have anything which will allow you to promote and achieve a cause. And it's therefore within the context of next steps, I'm wondering therefore if we shouldn't be challenging the opposition, if it is serious about shared governance, to bring its story smack as part of, for instance, the tripartite talks. We are not hearing, perhaps we are not privy to what people consider to be confidential information, though this is the country's business, and we are all entitled to know what it is that are engaging the minds of our leaders. But I'm not hearing that shared governance or inclusive governance or some such feature which goes to the heart of the cohesive society which we hope to build being part of the tripartite discussion.
A critical issue that I understand is part of a select committee is corporal punishment. No political party, none, has produced a document that can be a guide to the Guyanese people on corporal punishment. I never beat my children, but I know if you get rid of corporal punishment without any mechanisms
For discipline.
for discipline, you're in trouble. And so you have in Guyana a debate going and absolutely no policy direction from the political directorate, be it government or opposition. And to me, if you're talking about the next steps, we have to now create a core of young political people who understand that you just can't talk, that you have to have clear policy positions, you have to have a debate, look at the strengths, weaknesses, and then try to come up with rational positions to take this country forward. That's the first step for me. So, in every sector, so that the political party becomes more than just a run to parliament and election. It has to become a whole political machinery that is seeking to develop a political culture aimed at transferring the society based on new practical ideas.
Absolutely. I don't know, for instance, even if I will support shared governance in any way, shape, or form. I need to be convinced. I want to engage in that discussion and to have the opportunity to have the views of others who fear it, as well as those who embrace it. And hence, as a citizen, I will then have hopefully enough information to engage it or not engage it. But we have to have that as next steps.
And I I'm an advocate of shared governance. However, when I started to advocate shared governance, it was in the early post-Jagan PPP, where the level of corruption was not so barefaced. You see, shared governance also is about elites sharing power. I wonder now, I believed in shared governance, but I wonder now if it makes sense to share power with this level of corruption. Unless you can find a section of the PPP that is into policies and developing the society, you might end up in a situation where this continues. I am for shared governance, but it must bring change in the political culture. It must deal with corruption. One of the biggest problems this country has is corruption. I mean, you don't have to be a scientist. If you take the salary of senior government official and put it against the houses and see if they could get a mortgage and find out where the rest of the money comes from.
I tell you what, we are quickly running out of time. The last item which I want to introduce on this installment of Next Steps is the question of procurement. Another one of those governance style concerns. Public procurement, the Procurement Commission. The government now wishes to have a presence in that process, which, if you recall, was explicitly forbidden, even as we contemplated what was best in our best interest. Your comments on Next Steps.
So I don't know that the government wants to have a presence, because the last I heard is that the senior advisor to the president said that they're not going to announce any representatives. So the AFC have come up with their representative, the APNU has their representative, and the PPP is yet to announce who is going to be on that commission. It's a constitutional commission.
The fundamental
Constitution
problem
says that we must have a procurement commission.
Yeah, the
but I think, let me just finish here, I won't be long. The Constitution says that we must have a procurement commission. But like Aubrey highlighted earlier when he spoke about the kleptomaniacs, to have a procurement commission is going to dry up the areas where they can steal.
A bill was presented in Parliament, I understand, and the bill was passed. It's now it's enacted. I'm not too sure if it's assented to by the President. The problem is the commission is supposed to be an independent commission. The problem is with the government is that, as it stands right now, they sign off on all contracts. The problem I understand is that the government wants to have a say.
The cabinet must have assent.
The government must have a say. It must be able to assent to, any contracts that have been by the Public Procurement Commission. Where is the independence of this commission if the government still overlords on whether this contract goes through or not? Where is the independence?
Next Steps? You have a half a minute. Next step? You will close this off, Aubrey.
Next step is for the political opposition to press the case to have the commission formally established. And if you have a case as a government, as you like to go to court, maybe you can take it to court. You can take the matter to court.
Mark?
Next step, I think the next step is for the political opposition to educate and agitate, and that is the only way we'll have change, by educating the populace and then molding it into an agitative force to agitate for the change that is necessary. Those are the next steps.
Aubrey?
The opposition has to have a clear policy position on procurement. It has to have clear objectives of what it sets out to achieve. and how it's going to achieve it. For instance, one of the reasons the first set of PPP people were objected to by the opposition was because they want, as I understand the commission, it wanted a professional engineer,
That's correct.
a professional
That's
accountant,
professional people. That's
professional people, so that you can have a proper assessment and you move on. Now, what is in question? The real issue is the PPP is not prepared to give one bit on this issue because the source of funding, the source of illegality, the base of corruption is a system in which the cabinet finally decides who gets what, when, and how, according to Laswell.
Tonight on Spotlight, we have engaged a series of next steps. And this is only an attempt to try to cast a gaze on the things in our society which have been raising their heads ad nauseum over the last number of years, but which seem to be escaping us. Even as Aubrey puts it, we engage in one firefight after the other about things that may appear important at the time, but within the larger scheme of how we organize ourselves to ensure that we optimize on the use of our resources and that it's evenly distributed with an even expectation of the receipt of portions of those resources by all of the citizens. Clearly, the discussion we have had here indicates that we have to seriously engage as a nation the next steps that have to do with some of these things which have been highlighted tonight. In focus were issues of local governance, the centrality of local governance in this circumstance of overall governance, the question of the procurement, how important that is, the issue of the changing once and for all the structure of the highly politicized GCOM, the Elections Commission, to make it a truly independent body which enjoys the confidence of all Guyanese, even as they take their turn periodically to go to the poll to establish who they want to be in superintendence of their affairs. One hopes that this discussion will continue in the homes and in the bars, and that we will all move to some activism in establishing the next steps. I'm Grantley Waldron, saying on behalf of Aubrey Norton, Mark Archer, and Eugene Gilbert, good night from Spotlight.
GT mobile money, easy as 1, 2, 3. Get access to your money like ABC. Buy your own credit, pay your own bills. Send and receive money anytime, anyway. Money in your phone, mobile money.
Get registered today for your mobile account. Dial *123#. Register for free at any mobile money agent or GT&T office with your GT&T mobile phone. GT&T, best value in Guyana.